We now have a presentation on the U.S. Open, and for this we have Ms. Denise Dyer, the Economic Development Director, and Mr. Kevin Phelps, Deputy County Executive of Pierce County. Welcome. It's been a long time, Kevin.
Mayor Anderson and members of the Lakewood City Council, thank you so much for inviting us to come here this evening. On behalf of our County Executive, Pat McCarthy, and our Pierce County Council, both Denise and I are here to help hopefully educate those of you here both at the chamber dais and also in the audience about what's taking place with a very special event that will be happening in June of 2015. So I'm going to walk you through a quick PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to leave a few minutes for questions in case you have any. My goal tonight would be to give you a little bit of background on the USGA itself, talk about where we're at with the planning, what stage we're in, talk a little bit about economic development opportunities for the city, and then, as I mentioned, to kind of close with some questions. And they're going to make me work a remote control and talk at the same time, so we'll see how this goes. So a little bit about the U.S. Open. It is the second of 4 major championships that happen each year, and it's designed to be the most challenging golf event of the year. So the organizer, the USGA, they take pride in the fact that the scores will be probably the worst of any scores to win a championship. They hope that if you only shoot par over 4 days, that likely puts you in contention for winning the championship. It's conducted by the United States Golf Association, which was formed in 1894. And the 2015 Open will be the 115th U.S. Open Championship. Back in 2010, we had the 110th opening of the U.S. Amateur Championship, which is actually the oldest championship that the USGA does by about 1 day. They actually concluded the original very first U.S. Amateur Championship, and then immediately went into the U.S. Open Championship later on. It will take place on June 18th through the 21st. It always takes place over Father's Day weekend. And so it's consistent every year for doing that. And this will be the first U.S. Open Championship ever held in the United States, in the Northwest. So it's a great opportunity for us here. So I want to talk a little bit about what the championship is not. There's typically can be a lot of misinformation. First of all, it's not a Super Bowl. Now, I say that because sometimes we refer to these mega events, and one that kind of comes to mind would be a Super Bowl taking place in a community. But there are quite a few differences between this. First of all, the Super Bowl is really primarily a one-day event, and it's really focused around about a 3.5 to 4 hour game. So to kind of capture the tourist attention and the fans coming to see, they do things like Fan Fest and other kinds of activities to kind of keep people busy. But the U.S. Open Championship is quite a bit different than that. And the reason why is it's really a 7-day event. While the tournament is 4 days, or 4 rounds spread out over 4 days, it's actually 7 days in terms of the fans having an opportunity to come and participate. It is not uncommon for, during the 3 practice rounds, to have attendance of 25 to as high as 30,000 per day to watch the golfers practice. One of the neat features that the USGA does is they're very committed to our military community. And so during the 3 practice rounds, they've announced they're going to be able to provide free admission during the 3 practice rounds to any person who has military ID. So they're very, very committed to that portion. But again, it's an event that takes place over 7 days. It's really, if you think about it, we're expecting about 235,000 people over that 7 days. But this would be equivalent to almost 4 Super Bowls in terms of attendance. As I mentioned before, it was founded in 1894. It is the governing body of golf, along with the Europe's Royal and Ancient Golf Club. So what happens every 2 years, the USGA and the Royal and Ancient Club get together to talk about the rules of the game. For those of you who are golfers, you'll know this year's been a lot of controversy about what's called the belly putter, which is the real long putter that you can anchor to your belly. And the USGA had just announced that they're going to ban that from tournament competition. gotten a lot of comments, as you can imagine, and it would also, in theory, impact all of us amateur golfers if we want to follow by the rules. They're headquartered in New Jersey. They are a not-for-profit organization. They host 13 national championships throughout the year. And their purpose really is to promote the game of golf. So again, they are a not-for-profit organization. They're designed to promote the sport and make sure that it has a history going forward. They are the largest contributor to what's called the First Tee program, which is a program designed to get inner-city youth and minority youth involved in the game of golf. And so they are the largest single contributor nationally to the First Tee program. They are separate from the PGA. And so I want to give just a little bit of quick golf etiquette, because we sometimes, if we're not golfers, we use those terms interchangeably. The PGA, which stands, of course, for the Professional Golfers Association, is owned by the tour players. The PGA Tour is actually owned by the tour players, but they are different than the USGA. The USGA, again, they govern all equipment, all rules, and they conduct one championship a year. In the PGA Tour, for the most part, if you want to host a tournament in your community, if you have a good golf course and you can guarantee a big enough check, you can pretty well get a golf tournament there. So in 1998 at Sahali, they had the AT&T, or was it? Now I'm trying to, maybe in U.S. West, they change all the names of the telecommunications companies. But that was essentially where locally the club raised money, guaranteed a certain amount of money to go towards the event, and it was held there. The USGA is totally different than that. They have a very rigorous site selection. And so what they're concerned about is making sure that the golf course itself is the toughest golf course that you can find. So that kind of asks the question then, that's why Chambers Bay has been selected. They believe that Chambers Bay Golf Course will provide one of the toughest tests during those 4 days, and so they've paid very, very close attention to the design of the golf course. They were out here, of course, in full during the U.S. Amateur, and since that time, we've done a number of different changes to help make sure that it does play really tough. Let's talk really quickly about the U.S. Amateur. Very successful. We had attendance of about 33,000 people for the week-long event. Only amateurs can sign up for that, obviously. The winner gets the Havelmeyer Trophy and also gets an invitation to the U.S. Open and to the Masters. It's usually won by young golfers, because the really good golfers typically go on to a pro career, but there's been exceptions to that rule. One of the great golfers of all time, Bobby Jones, who was a physician, never did go pro and won the U.S. Amateur well into his career because he wanted to maintain that amateur perspective. And you can qualify by having a handicap of 2.4 or less. Now, the U.S. Open, as I mentioned, will have about 235,000 people, but both pros and amateurs can enter. There's a qualifying process to go through, so that's what's very unique about this, is that you will have some of the world's best professional golfers, but they could be walking down the fairway with an amateur who happens to have done very well in some of the qualifying tournaments. But this, however, is usually won by professional golfers. And to qualify, you have to be a handicap index of 1.4 or less. So they call it an open for this reason. You're not invited by the USGA. Around the world, they provide qualifying matches. And so if you're in the top 50 golfers on the current tour, you get an automatic berth. And then they have qualifying, and then past winners get an invite, and then you can qualify for this. And literally there will be qualifying matches in the Pacific Rim, in Australia, in Europe. So it literally draws people from around the world. So let's talk a little bit about the role of Pierce County. First of all, our primary role was to lease the golf course to the USGA. This is their event. They are responsible primarily for the planning of it. So we have a lease arrangement which gives them control of the golf course. They actually will start taking control of the golf course as early as March in 2015. And so there's a very specific contract on how we do that. It's also our responsibility to prepare the golf course to get it ready for the Open in 2015. After the amateur in 2010, we sat down with our course architect and with the USGA and went through a number of changes they wanted to see take place to make the golf course not only more difficult, but in some cases to make the golf course more fair to the golfers. And we've just really wrapped up approximately $1.3 million in additional course improvements. The USGA has funded most of those. They've funded about $900,000 of those roughly $1.3 million of actual cost. We are also, of course, the lead partner for the USGA on logistics. Being that we're a governmental agency, we have obviously some things that we can do that a private golf club couldn't do when it comes to helping them make this thing happen. And then our other big goal really is to make sure that our guests that are coming to town and the USGA feel very welcomed into our community. And I can't underscore this enough, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but our goal is not to have one U.S. Open and be done. We've got an outstanding opportunity that if this goes well, that we could be part of their rotation. And their rotation typically is about every 10 years, sometimes every 12 years. Although at Bethpage, which is a state park-owned golf course in New York, they held both the 2002 and the 2009 U.S. Open Championships. So sometimes they even go faster than every 10 years. But our goal is to make sure the USGA and their staff and fans feel very welcome into our community. Now, one of the most frequent questions we get is, well, the U.S. Open's not coming because you guys don't have a clubhouse. I tell you, we get that question all the time. But the reality of it is our contract does not require a clubhouse. And the bottom line is this: there is not a golf course in the United States that has a large enough built environment, a large enough built clubhouse to hold everything that makes up the U.S. Open. It is a huge event. If you can look up here in your picture here, that is just some of the corporate tents, and I underline some, at Bethpage in 2009. They literally build hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet of quality meeting space. So the fact that we don't have a clubhouse has absolutely no bearing on their interest in this golf course. In fact, to the contrary, Chambers Bay is quite large. We have a very large footprint. We're on about 300 acres. The U.S. Open coming up in June in Marion, Pennsylvania is on about 120 acres. Been a huge challenge to get all their infrastructure located on that course. So they love our wide open landscape, and so again, we do not need to have a clubhouse to make this event go forward. So as I mentioned, Denise Dyer is here from our Economic Development Division. So what is really the economic impact? We hear numbers floated around quite a bit, both in terms of any kind of a sporting event. But after the 2008 U.S. Open in Torrey Pines, they actually had San Diego State University, independent of the USGA and of the community, conducted a financial analysis of the impact of the U.S. Open that had just taken place. And as you can see by the screen, they said it generated an economic impact to the region of $142 million in 2008. The organizers in San Francisco, which is where the 2012 U.S. Open Championship was held, their estimate was 140 to 170 million. Now those are kind of the two ranges, because in 2008 the economy was still humming along pretty good. They'd already committed to most of their corporate sponsorships. We actually saw a little bit of a decrease in economic benefit or impact in 09 and 010, but now it's starting to build back up again. We don't know yet quite what we're impacting or projecting for 2015, but we believe it's safe to say that the 140 to 150 million dollars of economic impact should be easily attainable. When we have questions, I've got Denise here to answer any specific questions you might have about how that income and how that sales tax revenue and were distributed and where the impacts were at. Again, kind of repeating myself here a little bit, but the attendance we're projecting is 235,000 over the 7 days. Based on 2011 numbers, the average golfer or attendant spends $1,256 during their time at the golf course. In fact, I saw some additional data today that the USGA was presenting to some of our elected officials that Mayor Anderson and Councilmember Barth was at, is that they figure, for example, the average person stays 7 to 8 hours per day during their trip here. So it's a very long event that captures people for a long period of time. Now, the primary impact to the area, and I think this is really important to lock in on if you get questions from your constituents. The primary impact is one is going to take place on the golf course. So most of the economic spending will take place while they're there on the golf course. The two big exceptions of that will be obviously hotels will do extremely well and restaurants should see a big benefit. But what you probably likely will not see is your local retail base necessarily benefiting from this. Having attended a number of U.S. Opens myself, I can tell you after spending 7 or 8 hours all day long fighting 40,000 people, usually when you leave and leave the course, you want to go home, get some food, get cleaned up, and hit the sack. And so it's not like the Super Bowl where people are looking for somewhere to go, for some event to do. They generally have spent their time and their energy and their money on the golf course. I mentioned to you that that they have, they build out all their own merchandise tents. Their main merchandising tent that will be set up at the golf course is almost 1 acre in size. The merchandising tent at the U.S. Open at Olympic Club did almost $14 million in the 7 days in retail merchandise. So again, it tends to capture a lot of both the food and beverage and extra sales there, but where we will see a benefit in the community will clearly be our hotel rooms and our restaurants and just a little bit of other things like rental cars in the area. 87,000 room nights is the projected impact to our hotels. The USGA already has booked most of the major hotels in the Tacoma, Fife, Lakewood area for their use. So they have got their hotels booked for their staff, for their guests. If you try to get online right now and find a room, you likely would not be able to find one. We have just recently let them know about the 2 new hotels coming online here in Lakewood. They were not aware of that, and so they're getting prepared to reach out to the developer and operator to talk about arrangements for that as well. As you can imagine, any new hotels that can come online between now and 2015, they'll have tremendous amount of interest in. Again, as the circle goes out, the impact will be felt most really in UP, Lakewood, and Tacoma, but then it will kind of spill out. And it's likely that Thurston County and King County will see some impact, but again, it will be somewhat measured. Now, one of the other big issues is transportation. Their model is pretty specific about how they move people to the event. Again, there is not a golf course built in America that could anticipate having 35 or 40,000 people show up at one time to see the event. So their model primarily is to ask all guests who are coming to the event to go to a shuttle area, and then they provide free regular transportation to and from the golf course all day long and into the evening. They usually have dwell times of between 5 and 7 minutes on their buses, so you don't have to wait very long, and they have buses going back and forth from so they may do like 1 or 2 or 3 primary lots in the area, and they're still working on what that may look like. They have not made any decisions there, but the model will be the same. They will use buses to get the guests in and out, and so likely the neighborhood in and around the golf course, unless you're a resident living there and have credentials, they will not even allow the general public to get very close to Chambers Bay Golf Course. We've had excellent meetings with the Joint Base commander, with Colonel Hodges and with his team to talk about possible using some of their facilities. They have been very, very gracious and are giving us some different ideas of what can happen. But again, we're quite a ways away from knowing exactly what that transportation plan will look like. We will expect some closures, as I mentioned, in the area. But again, for the most part, the impact really is going to be pretty minor. It won't be logjam and things in and around the area because, again, we're going to encourage everybody not to go there. The USGA have got this down to a science. When you go to their other sites and when you look at the corridors being used to bus people in and out, you will see randomly tow trucks and spare buses staged along the way so that if they do have a mechanical failure, that they can instantly get a tow truck there to clear the intersection or clear the road and transfer people onto a new bus. So very little is left to, the chance with the USGA. They spend a tremendous amount of time planning the logistics out. So a couple of things that we really hope that you can do as the city is, one is to continue to answer questions of your constituents, because I know as we get closer and closer to the event, that will, I'm sure the interest will increase quite a bit. We want to make sure that we hope that our community is not scheduling other real large events during the U.S. Open. So for one of the examples is that typically the week of Father's Day is when University Place School District would be holding graduation ceremonies. And so we've already reached out to the superintendent, and so we might be looking at trying to accelerate their graduation ceremonies so that they don't have to worry about running buses. And they will probably change their entire school calendar that year to try to have school out prior to the start of the week of the U.S. Open Championship. The other thing is we want to make sure that our local jurisdictions are not doing major road construction programs. Nothing worse than to schedule and let a contract for a major overlay only to find out that that's a major corridor to be bringing this in. I know I've had a discussion with the mayor of Steilacoom, and they wanted to know what our schedule was, because they are planning in the next 2 or 3 years some different major overlay projects in Steilacoom. We'll make sure to coordinate that with the different jurisdictions to ensure that that doesn't happen. Public safety. This is a gigantic issue, as you can imagine. So I want to kind of go back to the Super Bowl analogy just for a second. Typically, what would happen in a community if we decided, we've got a dome, we've got a stadium, we want to compete for a Super Bowl in 7 years. What typically would happen, the community would come together, all the jurisdictions, all the business community, the state, all the different players, and they would put together a bid package. And they would come in and say, here's what we will do. If you will award us the Super Bowl, we will do all of these things. And they typically cover things like security and law enforcement and public safety and all the different first responder community. And they typically come in, like we did for the U.S. Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver, BC. Our state had real money on the table to assist Vancouver, BC with the elements of the Open, or the Olympics. Well, here it's backwards. We've already kind of got the Open. They didn't ask us to see what we would do, but they built this relationship on trust. It is their expectation that the local community will reach out to our first responders and our public safety to try to find resources to help cover the tremendous amount of costs that it will take to put this on. So as we get that plan developed in more clarity, the planning committee will be reaching out to Lakewood, to the different jurisdictions to see how you can assist this Open. We believe this is one of the keys to getting an invite back to do a future U.S. Open. The other thing is we want to get prepared for is going to be the onslaught of media. So they plan on credentialing 2,000 media from around the world. I took a picture here. This is a picture I took when I was back at the Olympic Club. This is about half of the media room where the media is lined up. It is the amount of exposure that this community will get is tremendous. One of the things that we mention in here is that typically when they go to, like they're going to go to Pinehurst in a few years. Pinehurst has a long history of U.S. Open Championships. So when the media comes in, they have all kinds of unique stories about winners in the past. They have no history here. So one of the things we want to reach out to the cities around us is let us tell our story to a world audience. NBC, which has the exclusive contract for all of the broadcast rights, has already indicated they want to reach out in the community and tell those unique, compelling stories of this community so that hopefully it kind of becomes a Chamber of Commerce Visitor and Convention Bureau moment that we can benefit for many years to come. Volunteers, as we wrap up here, it takes a tremendous amount of volunteers to make this happen. They are expecting that we'll need between 4,000 and 6,000 volunteers. Now let me put quotations around volunteer. You get to pay to be a volunteer. Sounds kind of counterintuitive. But to be a volunteer, it will cost about $185 to get the right to give up at least a minimum of 16 hours during the U.S. Open week. And one of the reasons why they charge for it is they do an extensive background check, but more importantly, Ralph Lauren is their supplier of all the USGA official gear. They will provide all their volunteers in hats, shirts, outerwear in case the weather gets inclement, and so that all comes as part of the package. In Marion this year, they are needing roughly 4,500 employees or volunteers. They have 3,000 volunteers on the wait list. So what will happen is, it says here recruitment will start in 2013. Actually, we're going to kick off recruitment for volunteers in January of 2014. If your constituents have a question, they can certainly go to our website, the chambersbay.com website, and there'll be a link to the USGA that will get you there. Planning is going great. As we close, we've completed all of our major course improvements. Now we're just letting the course grow in and firm up. One of the big issues was creating wider corridors between the dunes. Again, you wouldn't really notice as a golfer, but when you're moving as many people as we move, what we recognized, we had a lot of pinch points that we had to widen. So unless you really know the golf course really well, you wouldn't notice it, but we've spent extensive amount of time widening our major corridors. The championship director, Danny Sink, has already arrived. He showed up roughly in October of last year. He will stay here all the way through the Open, and then we'll wind up the Open. It'll take him about September of 2015 to kind of complete the taking down of all this. But he's already on site, and he's already very, very active in the in the things that they're doing. I mean, they're doing things like geotechnical reports, soil testing, because if we construct stands to hold the large amount of people, you want to make sure the soil can take it. So we're doing core samples, and so it's that level of work that gets done. So with that, again, I hope I haven't gone too long for your presentation. Both Denise and I are here to answer any questions, but obviously we're very, very excited about the opportunity. What we've challenged our business community, we had a kickoff planning committee, what we call the host committee, that Denise is in charge of, that we challenged our business community to not look at this event as what's in it for us, but to put your civic hat on and say, what can we do as a business community to make sure that this is the finest U.S. Open that could possibly take place in our region, because that's our path for moving forward. And so with that, I don't know, Denise, have you had anything you wanted to? Oh, I've got one other thing I want to wind up with. This is probably the best part. So, are you going to? Yeah, oh, great. Thank you.
What began more than a century ago, on shores thousands of miles to the east, is coming to the Pacific Northwest for the first time. The U.S. Open Championship stands as the greatest test of golf.
The Open Golf King of the United States, Little Ben, Goliath of golf.
Filling the dreams of every young boy who's ever picked up a club.
It's the greatest feeling in the game, coming to the 18th hole and knowing you've won.
Setting the ultimate stage for golf's biggest heroes.
A remarkable week by a remarkable player.
Attracting fierce competitors from around the world.
From Northern Ireland, he's a U.S. Open champion at Pebble Beach.
And producing generations of homegrown champions. For more than 100 years, the game's greatest players have pursued golf's ultimate prize.
U.S. Open champion, oh my! What a clutch putt. Yes.
And now, you are inheriting this legacy. Secure your place. Join this celebration.
Tiger Woods and his second U.S. Open championship.
For the first time ever, the U.S. Open is coming to your doorstep.
Is it enough?
of the Northern Irish.
Looks good. Do you believe it? What can you say?
In 2015, the eyes of the world will focus on the beauty and the brawn of Chambers Bay in University Place. The 115th U.S. Open. Be a part of history.
I believe now I conclude my presentation.
Any questions from council? Mr. Bulkey.
Yeah, you mentioned parking, and are we going to know, I guess when the parking is decided, we'll know what corridors the buses plan to use. I mean, there'll be planned corridor, I mean, clearly, so are you anticipating 3 or 4 corridors, and could we end up with 1 or 2 in Lakewood? If you use the base, will you use Bridgeport, or do you have any idea?
Well, first, Councilmember Bulkey, this is their number one thing they have to get kind of figured out. So they're right in the middle of doing their analysis. We've had meetings with the Port of Tacoma as potential sites. They've toured the Puyallup Fairgrounds. They've toured, as I mentioned, JBLM. We have a meeting coming up next week with the City of Lakewood to look at some possibilities and options. Once they kind of determine how many places they will need, they'll then determine the corridors, and then they'll start working with the local jurisdictions to make sure that those corridors are consistent with their plan. It may require some changing of signals to accommodate buses to give them kind of priority, but they won't do anything in a vacuum. Once they start locking in on what they think is the best approach, they'll reach out. One thing we're involved with is sound transit. We get this question a lot about sound transit. They're only concerned about taking passengers to the course itself is the fact that they have to be able to run trains all day long. They don't want everybody hanging around till 7 o'clock, the last train's at 7:30, and they have 1,000 people who can't get on a train and go back home. So what more likely may happen, however, is they may look at the 56th Street station and the Lakewood station as being terminus, try to encourage people from King County to go to there and then have bus service from there rotating back and forth. But again, I caution this is really preliminary, but those are the types of approaches they're looking at.
Okay, so we'll know a year in advance or so?
I would think by this fall, we'll have a pretty good idea of what their intent is for their parking system.
So we can fill in potholes is really, I'm trying to be funny, but the other question, couple other questions. One that will come up, I'm sure soon, is people wanting to cash in and rent their homes. Is that a pipe dream, or is that something, and if they ask us, where would we direct them?
Yes.
It is a pipe dream?
And it's probably outside of, do we have to have a clubhouse? It's probably the second most asked question that we get. And the USJ doesn't want to get involved in that. I think where the rumor kind of came out, during the U.S. Amateur, because you have non-professional athletes, there is a component where they can stay in the community. And so we provided homes for about 60 of the golfers at the 2010 Open. In fact, the person who finished second, Peter Cantlay, who's now was the number 1 ranked amateur in the world, stayed with Executive McCarthy's assistant, Connie Perry. That was actually, they provided the home for Peter during his time at the U.S. Amateur. But no, it's very unlikely that the golfers will go out of their way. But there may be an opportunity, and the USGA has agreed to at least putting a link on a website to try to connect people to the real estate market and to the right people to be able to align them. But what they continue to caution, don't oversell this. It'll be really only a handful.
Okay. And where would we find out that cities like ours, because I mean clearly some of these are other or most of these other events are in relatively urban areas, although ours is very urban, but the cities like ours that are in the direct path of something like this, but not right in the middle of it, although we're fairly close, and we have a limited number of hotels, where would we find out what other cities have done to kind of prep themselves well to help, put their best face forward, that kind of thing?
I would be more than glad to provide, maybe go back and work with the USGA to maybe identify some communities with some contact information of some past. You're right, it's kind of all over the board. In San Francisco, obviously a very urbanized area was last year. Before that, in 2011, was congressional in Washington, D.C. But Marion is actually is quite a ways outside of Philadelphia. And then next year is Pinehurst, and probably 90% of the people will have to drive at least a half hour from their hotel room just to get into Pinehurst, because there's just such few hotel rooms that are there. So I'll try to provide you, I'll forward that to your city manager, can distribute to your colleagues information on that.
Ms. McGovern.
When you referenced public safety and that you were going to come back later and talk to us about that, years ago, when Joe came to us talking about the golf course and about money, I think I recall he wanted $25,000 or something, and mentioned that there was this pot of money they needed in the very beginning to do things, and that there was going to be money, profit coming forward in the future, although we were only going to be investing money and not reaping any of the profits. So we sort of had a conversation about, well, we'd be happy to loan you $25,000 if we could get the same return on our investment that you're going to get on yours, and that didn't go very far. So when you come back to us to talk about public safety, I assume there's going to be a price tag on that. And my question is then, the same as it was 8 years ago. Are we going to be able to reap some rewards if indeed you're getting a return on your investment for that same area?
So we've estimated for...
Are you here? Okay, 5 years ago. The mayor was here too.
We've estimated that Lakewood, Denise just gave me this, that on the conservative side, just the hotel-motel tax, correct, is about $28,000 impact to Lakewood, but that's really based on only $110 million of overall economic impact. If I could just maybe throw a little bit different perspective when you say return on the investment. Pierce County has invested approximately $32 million in the golf course. We have operating losses every year. This year will be about $1.2 million of net operating loss. And what's interesting is when you look at the sales tax distribution and the hotel-motel tax distribution, and you look at all the people who will benefit for the U.S. Open coming in, we're actually, I believe, 7th or 8th of impact. So I guess all I would say is that in some ways, Pierce County directly gets the least amount of the economic benefit, and yet we burden and have invested our resources and continue to subsidize the golf course so that it can be in the kind of condition that would attract a future U.S. Open championship. And we're committed to that model. The one thing that USGA will be very clear about, that if they want us to be in the running for a future U.S. Open championship, that we will have to maintain this golf course in a certain condition. Quite frankly, that is a whole other layer. If you're trying to maintain Tacoma Golf and Country Club at a level B, we will have to be contractually obligated to keep it at a level A. They even control what we can do in terms of how much we can increase green fees the 2 years leading up to the U.S. Open and the 2 years preceding the U.S. Open Championship, because they don't want to see the local community come in and kind of gouge, these visitors kind of coming into the area. So we'll certainly work with you on the numbers. I think it's a very fair statement. We're not going to ask really to write a check out, but what we're hoping is that the jurisdictions will feel a sense of opportunity to help provide, maybe allocate some resources when it comes to public safety. We're not going to require anybody to do that. We're going to try to make it a community ask, but we're already having conversations with King County and Thurston County and most of the major communities. And so we're going to try to spread that request out really over a large area. But return on investment, I think Councilmember Boki will echo this. There's a lot of people who argue on a regular basis this is far from a return on investment for Chambers Bay Golf Course.
Mr. Boki.
Senior Opens in the past, they tended to raise money, and I think you mentioned something about not-for-profits that don't typically when these big tournaments come in, or any tournament, they give money to not-for-profits at the end, or they raise a certain amount. Could you talk about that in regards to the U.S. Open? Because I remember back when they used to have the senior thing at Inglemore or whatever, and they would raise money every year for, I don't even know who it was for. Are they doing it, number one? How does it work? What are we anticipating?
Thank you, and I shouldn't have skipped over this because it's an important part of their model. So what they do is they have national vendors they deal with. The reality is there's nobody here locally that could help construct stands in the fairway and around the greens to accommodate 40,000 people. So they have a national company that comes in. Same way on their food and beverage. They have a company called Prom, which is a national company that they have a contract with. But Prom's model is really, really unique. What they will do is once they determine all their food locations and the different type of cuisine, and it'll be all over the board. It'll be very much like going to a very large bite of Tacoma. They will go after for social groups like Kiwanis, Rotarians, church groups, scouting groups, whoever wants to do it, they can put in to help work the event. And then what Prom does is write a check back out based on a percentage of the sales done that day to go towards their core function. So they give a lot of money back through that mechanism. So they ask people to volunteer, and then they write a big check out to that organization where they can use it for whatever program. It's Rotary. They could have their scholarship foundation, whatever they want to do. And so that is a big part of their model.
I don't expect you to have an answer for this, but it's an issue on public safety which would need to be addressed in order for Lakewood to be a participant. We're looking at, contrast us with our neighbor to the north, University Place, who reaps a windfall from admissions tax, gets the sales tax revenue from $15, $20 million worth of direct sales that'll happen in conjunction with this, and really doesn't have a police department, where we have a rather substantial police department, and that's the resource. But whether it's the short term or the long term, it's very tough to justify contributing our police force or police resources to public safety to the taxpayers of Lakewood, where it's already such a large portion of our city budget and where we don't derive any direct revenue out of it. Now, with respect to our municipal courts, we contract that out to University Place. They like the arrangement, we like the arrangement, but they pay for it. How could we address that in a way that's mutually beneficial instead of unilaterally beneficial?
Mayor Anderson, you're correct in saying that the primary beneficiary really are the two people who may not have the ability to do a whole lot, one being the city of University Place and the state of Washington, because they get the lion's share of the state sales tax. I don't have an answer. That's a policy question that I think that I'm sure will have great discussion. I would just try to underline that this is an event unlike any other event in the history of our state. And that we have an opportunity really to, if you believe in, I wasn't much of I went to Washington State, and I wasn't a science major, I can assure you that. But I do remember osmosis, and that's that thought that you can improve yourself by bringing things from outside the membrane and bringing it inside. I would like to think that the U.S. Open will put our community, the South Sound region, on a map unlike anything else we've ever done, and that the residual benefits to the community from a sense of pride, from a sense of location, from golfers coming in to stay in hotel rooms a year from now, 3 years from now, to do it, there will be benefit to the taxpayers here in Lakewood. But we'll respectfully understand and accept what the city wants to do, but we will be going out and kind of bringing that message to see what can you do without disrupting your operations. Are there any resources you can provide, and see how that comes out. But it will be, at the end of the day, if we turn a bill over to the USGA for $500,000 for security, I can probably pretty well guarantee you that that we're one and out. So But I don't think we should put undue pressure on Lakewood just because you happen to be the closest. But we just would, we'll sit down and look through the process. We've already had discussion. I know Chief Sharp is here. We'll be having discussions with West Pierce Fire and Rescue because we need EMS support as well. They do draw a lot of other resources that are donated. For example, they have a long-standing relationship with the FBI. And the FBI will have all kinds of undercover personnel that will be at the Open during that 7 days. They have people who are like facial recognition experts that are undercover, and they do provide those resources from the federal government at no cost to help protect the citizens. But we'll have that conversation, and having once sat in a chair similar to yours, I get that policy discussion, and what we'll do is have a really good forthright discussion, and if it doesn't work for the city of Lakewood, we're still going to go out and put on as great of a U.S. Open as we can. We're going to try to do everything we can to benefit the great city of Lakewood, its hotels, its businesses that are here, and so that doesn't come with any strings attached. We will go out and do that, and then if it works well for the city to be a participant, that's fantastic.
So the FBA is going to intercept the chicken hat guy? You remember, I don't know if you remember the guy that jumped on the tournament with the chicken hat on. But,
people from Oregon are a lot smarter than me because I only went to WSU, so I don't miss that one.
As I did some fact checking after our conversation earlier today, and when the history of the U.S. Open and its connection to the locality isn't particularly well known, but it isn't tenuous. It was Long Jim Barnes, who had very recently been the pro at Tacoma Country and Golf Club, who won the 1921 U.S. Open. So there's a long-standing, I think his putter's hanging on the wall in the bar, but there's a long-standing connection with some of those early winners in our area. So maybe we can parlay that into a sidebar feature with NBC along the way. Any other questions from council? Mr. Branstetter?
Yes, Mr. Phelps, thank you for coming today. I actually had a question about the length of time that the golf course and the adjacent chambers of properties will be disrupted from access to the public. I know it's a 7-day event, but you've described building a small temporary town that has to be put up and then has to be taken down. And apart from golf, there's a lot of recreational use that's done on those properties. How does that, do you see that playing out in terms of the window in which use is going to be restricted for other uses other than golf?
So it'll happen in phases, but because they'll start constructing about 3 months out. However, that really shouldn't impact at the early stages the people's ability to be able to go through and to take the trails. But they're really anticipating by the first part of June that will start getting closed down to the public, because at that point your compound for your media is being built, most of your tenting is up. But they're very cognizant of the fact that this is a highly used area. We've notified, for example, we have a temporary dog park there in the Central Meadows, and we've let the Sundog group that has kind of helped put that together. They know that by somewhere in late May that fencing will have to come down and they won't be usable. It will then take probably about a week to get most of the major stuff out of there so we can open up the majority of the facilities. But they're going to work on a plan to try to minimize, but there will be definitely impact. We get constricted in revenue considerably. May, June, and early July are some of your busiest months of the year here in the Northwest for golf revenue. And part of our deal is there will not be a non-USGA person golfing at Chambers Bay from about the end of May on. So we'll totally close that course down to get it prepared so it's in pristine condition for the Open.
And the other, you mentioned during the 3 practice rounds that the intent is to allow military personnel access to be spectators and being able to go and do that. But are there any peripheral activities for youth and young people that are typically with that come with it with a U.S. Open package?
It's a great question. One, because USGA's primary mission statement is to promote the game of golf, they have a standing policy that any youth 12 and under, as long as they're accompanied by a ticketed adult, can get into the U.S. Open for free. The other thing, we had a very productive conversation with the Garrison Command at JBLM, and they have a very active first tee program, and so we're going to really sit down and see how we could maybe bolster the activities for our military families around the first tee program during kind of leading up to the U.S. Open and during the U.S. Open. But they're very committed to trying to have a positive impact with our youth here in the region, and because of a long-standing relationship with our armed forces, they see this as being a natural to have JBLM so close to the golf course.
And I would just suggest that you in a position to tell them about something that they may want to try to get some interaction with is the golf course at the Veterans Administration Hospital that particularly serves and is used by service members that have sustained injuries and are redeveloping, and being able to go and do that is both a great story and a bit of a secret. And you mentioned that NBC was going to be looking for things in the area to highlight, and that golf course with the level of volunteerism that goes into operating it, and the benefit that it provides to a particularly important segment of our community that we value here locally, would be something that would be nice to see highlighted in a manner that might bring some additional resources to even continue to enhance that facility.
That's an excellent suggestion, and I took a note of that. And just to let you know that during our meeting with the leadership at JBLM, the discussion about finishing off the golf course, the long-term vision they have, came up. And while there's certainly been nothing determinative concrete that you wouldn't want to write about, but the USGA said that they oftentimes get involved in those kinds of projects locally once they're all done. And so I think there's maybe a great opportunity. Maybe that could be something to really push for in our community, would be to see whether they could help us with that bigger vision of expanding the golf course, which I know you're familiar with. So.
Yeah, I'd note that is, the golf course there is on Veterans Administration property, but all the resources that are going into it are non-governmental. Right. So I'm a relatively new member of that board, and there are plans to try to have some event or publicity surrounding that connection with U.S. Open, because the Nicholas 9 is about halfway funded. So that's, like you said, a natural link.
I think we have a great opportunity to form a partnership with the USGA. It's a great organization. They've got a great organizational culture. One thing that's going for us is that the Northwest is an untapped market for them. It's a great segue into the Pacific Rim, which is a big market for them globally. And it's a public golf course. One of the things that's hurt golf course and golf over the years is that it's mostly been in private clubs that the average golfer doesn't have access to. And the fact that this is a golf course that anybody, any Joe golfer can go out and play one day and say, I played in the same golf course that Tiger Woods played at, is pretty rare. And so I think the opportunity is there, and that's why I really kind of stress that there's nothing required by the USGA in terms of partnering with the local community. In theory, we could just turn our backs and say, look, it's your event, you guys do whatever you want to do. But I think, in a longer range of vision, I think if we can find a way to forge a partnership with the USGA, it would be really advantageous. I'm kind of sworn to secrecy, but in the last 10 years, they held a tournament at a major golf course near a major U.S. city. And they were held, at the last minute, they were held hostage by health departments, by local law enforcement, by labor groups saying, well, that's not their job to unload, our job is unload. And it added a tremendous amount of last-minute stress to the USGA. The USGA thanked the host club and said, great job. And they said privately, they'll never be back in that state. Now, they never said that to the state. They never, their culture is one, they're kind of really generally nice people. But the reality of it is, there are communities begging to have an event like this that would give a substantial amount of local resources to be able to even qualify for it. I think we can just earn it by rolling out the welcome mat and being a good community partner. And I think it's going to happen. We've had a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from all of our jurisdictions by our local elected officials, and I'm sure we'll have a great event. So I really thank you for I know I've gone longer than what I promised, so I probably threw off the city manager's schedule tonight. But if you would like more information, we'd be more than glad to come back. If you'd like to hear somebody other than myself present, we want to make ourselves available at any time to work through these issues. Because certainly Lakewood, because of our proximity to the University Place, we are going to be impacted. And I say we because I do live here as well. And we want to make sure that I know what it's like to get phone calls from somebody who's unhappy they can't get in and out of their driveway or the traffic is congested. So we'll work all we can to minimize the impacts to Lakewood.
Thank you. And we know where to find you.
Thank you.